Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a crime mystery from Belgium, Dutch language English subs, released in the year 2014, directed by Hans Herberts, and this film is called The Treatment. So The Treatment is about a detective who's very troubled. When he was young, his younger brother was kidnapped by an accused that was never brought to justice. So this has played on his mind ever since. He is now an adult, a detective, but he's always had resentment towards this specific individual because he's always evaded police. So now he's going to have to control his emotional baggage because he comes across a crime scene where a young kid has been kidnapped. Now it has a lot of similarities with his brother's case, and so memories start flooding back, but then he realizes that in order to save more children from the same fate, he's going to have to uncover the sinister network behind it. So whether or not he can, something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on The Treatment. This is not a recent film, but it's a movie that I recently come across. And the reason why I wanted to check this movie out is because it's based on a very notorious book. It was a very upsetting book written by Mo Hader under the same name. Now, I haven't read the book, but having any movie based on a really controversial piece is definitely something that's going to pique my interest. And so I was told that this is going to be very disturbing and very challenging. So I went in there braced for impact. But I will say, although I was braced for impact, I still come away from this movie completely shaken. I will go as far to say that this is more disturbing than the movie Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. It had a very similar atmosphere to Seven, but I definitely feel as though it was a lot more evil than Seven. And that's saying something, because Seven is one of the most morbid films ever made. But this movie was on a completely different level. And although this is a crime mystery sort of police procedural film, I will go as far to say that it's also a horror film because of the horrific themes the movie depicts. And the fact that those horrific themes were handled so maturely, it doesn't come across as shock value just for the sake of shock value. It actually comes across as genuine shocks and actually a genuine sense of fear, because you know that the repercussions, if this detective doesn't stop this certain evil presence from doing what they're doing, you know that things are going to get really bad. And so you feel to yourself as a viewer, I can't take any more of this. Please solve this case and stop this evil presence from actually doing this. So if you have that level of fear factor, you have a level of suspense. And I thought this movie, the suspense was absolutely phenomenal because of that extremity. And so I thought as though it was handled so well, and a lot of extreme films can actually take note of this film, because this is exactly how you make an extreme experience. You make an experience done in a way where it's not overused, it's not gratuitous, but it's absolutely horrific. Therefore, you have that sense of fear. Therefore, you have that sense of caring for these characters and not wanting these characters to go through a similar fate. And I really thought as though the story was expertly handled. I thought the side story of this detective, the detective was incredibly intriguing. I wanted to know more about him, but then it never distracts itself from the overall story. And so as far as police procedural is concerned, you always get the detective, you always get the side story of the detective, but a lot of the time that side story can kind of distract you from the overall piece. But this movie didn't do that, because the side story of this detective starts to mold into the present day. And that's where it becomes so interesting, because none of this movie felt like it was distracting. And I always felt as though I was on a knife's edge because of the continuity, and the fluency was absolutely fantastic. And so it's one of those rare occasions where you get an extreme film that is really, really well made, and actually a story that matches it. And so if you have a really good story, really good characters, that extremity becomes even more extreme. And that's why I was shaken as much as I was, because a lot of extreme films out there, they're just really juvenile and they're just trying to make as much noise. But this movie is not doing that. I felt as though it was all really well thought out. I haven't read the novel. If you've read the novel and you want to share your thoughts on that, please feel free. But come into this movie not quite expecting how shocking it would be. I have to stress that if you are a sensitive viewer, you are going to be psychologically tormented for a very, very long time. If you're not a fan of the more challenging films, then do not watch this movie. This is a film that's going to upset a lot of people. It upset me. I was going through a roller coaster of emotions. I was feeling so much sympathy. I was feeling so much disgust, repulsion, and just a lot of sadness. The whole film has a really heavy heart. And so it always feels like it's dreary. As I said, it's got the atmosphere of Seven, where it's very dark and dreary, and so it's very, very uncomfortable, very, very dirty, and just incredibly shocking. And so be very, very careful. I thought as though the acting performances were all fantastic, and as I said, it's just captured in a really, really cruel world. So if it's not your kind of thing, definitely don't go and see this movie. It is horrific, and it's just one of the most morbid experiences that I have ever had. As I said, I'm not a massive fan of police procedural, but I thought the story, although it was horrific, it was incredibly interesting, and I really wanted to see what was going to happen at the end. Although I was covering my eyes, I couldn't help but look, because the director and the way that the movie is made, it forces you to look. It's basically looking at a car crash. You want to pass it, you don't want to see the horrific imagery, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's exactly how I would sum up The Treatment, is that it's a very mature, extreme film. If you like your police procedurals like Seven, chances are you're going to really appreciate The Treatment. I will say that's not a movie you're going to like, because it's impossible to like. It's right up there with movies like Martyrs and Irreversible, where you can only watch once every year or two, because it's just such a draining film where you just feel, as I said, so many emotions. And at the end of the day, you can't help but appreciate for how brave this filmmaking is and how competent it is actually made. And so it just makes the extremity even more extreme. The themes, as I said, I cannot stress this enough, the themes are incredibly sick, but as I said, handled in such a way where there's a lot of implication as opposed to cheap trick graphic detail, which I thought was really well handled, and just creates a monster inside your mind that you can't help but feel that monster is always going to beat you. And so it's an incredibly psychologically damaging film, so be very careful going into that. But if it sounds like your kind of thing, go out there and see it. This is extreme filmmaking at its best. I'm going to give this movie 4.5 stars. All right, guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.